Good morning, church. Man, it is the most wonderful time of the year. It's March Madness, and the NBA playoffs are soon to begin. I'm excited. What a game last night. Can I get an amen? All right, y'all didn't watch it. Okay, whatever. It's your own fault. You missed out. Some awesome basketball. I absolutely love basketball. After my wife, sometimes my first love was basketball, just to keep her humble. I love basketball. In fact, if you don't know me, my name is Brandon, one of the ministers here. If you don't know me, you may have had the thought right when you saw me walk up on stage, I wonder if he played in the NBA. I get that a lot, mostly from like kindergartners who see me make a shot, wow, are you professional? No, I never get that. I'm 6 feet tall, which I learned fairly recently makes me taller than the average man on planet Earth, which I was kind of excited about. But I'm about 7 inches short of the average NBA player. The average NBA player is 6'7". That's Luka Doncic's height. And Luka looks pretty short next to a guy like Kristaps Porzingis at 7'3" and Boban at 7'4". Mind-blowing heights, okay? Now, from a young age, I dreamed of playing in the NBA. And I can't just say that it was when I was a kid. I got to be honest, at 41 years old, I still daydream. I daydream that I'm about 6'10", and I'm just an unstoppable force in the NBA playing for my Dallas Mavericks. It's a problem. But at some point, for many young children, that whole expectations versus reality thing comes to light, and you realize, yeah, I'm not going to even play D1. I'm definitely not making the NBA, okay? So I have this struggle. I have to confess, I have this inward struggle when I meet tall guys. I'm talking like over 6'5". When I meet tall guys over 6'5" or so who never played basketball. What are you doing with your life, man? Come on. And there's this inner monologue of like a really hard-nosed Southern Baptist preacher that's just like, you have squandered what the Lord has given you. It is a struggle, okay? I'm like, could we just trade? Like, you can have this and I can have that, and I would be in the NBA. And it takes a lot more than just being tall, y'all, okay? I'm not just... NBA players are on a whole nother planet. But I struggle. I struggle with that comparison. And I don't want to knock you tall guys who did not play basketball and use that towards that gift. I know for me personally, I got a ton of things that I should have done. That I had the gifting, I had the God-given ability, but I just didn't apply myself. I can talk about that on physical levels. I can talk about that on spiritual levels. I'm sure all of us have those things that we look back and go, man, I wish I had explored this gift. I wish I recognized I had this talent or this passion or this ability at a younger age when I could have done more with that. And I bet most of us have a lot of regret regarding that. I can't stand regret. One of the good things I think is I bet if we surveyed this room, our list of things we regret doing is probably shorter than the list of things we regret not doing. Both are a frustration. But the parable that we're looking at this morning, the parable of the talents, what Jesus is discussing here, what he's trying to teach and get across is much, much, much heavier than missed out opportunities in athletic endeavors or something that really doesn't matter all that much or things that the world puts such a value or is impressed by or success as society identifies it. It's much, much heavier. We're going to pick up in Matthew chapter 25. We're actually going to start in verse 13. Let's jump right in. Be on the alert then, because you do not know the day nor the hour, for it is just like a man about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey. The one who had received 5 talents immediately went and did business with them and earned 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had received the 2 talents earned 2 more. But he who received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have earned 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter the joy of your master. Also, the one who had received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have earned 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You are faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter the joy of your master. Now, the one who had received the 1 talent also came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. And I was afraid. So I went away and I hid your talent in the ground. See, you still have what is yours. But his master answered and said to him, You worthless slave, worthless, lazy slave. Did you know that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter seed? Then you ought to have put my money in the bank. And on my arrival, I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore, take the talent away from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. And throw the worthless slave into the outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Whew, it ends pretty heavy, doesn't it? So a few months back when we laid out this moral and the story series, and Bob and Bo and I were discussing which sermons we wanted, I saw this one and I knew I wanted it. I knew a couple of points I wanted to make. I knew exactly where I wanted to land, and I jumped on it. But then I started digging into this thing and started studying over the last 2 weeks, and I was like, ooh, I didn't realize there was so much controversy over this parable. I didn't realize that there was so much mystery as to what is it exactly Jesus is teaching and what exactly do the talents mean. And how there's a big debate over faith and works and grace and salvation and once saved, always saved. And can you lose your salvation? And all these different debates that have been strongly debated in different doctrines and different circles, and a lot of confusion that people have walked around with this parable. So I'm going to attempt to break down some of this for us. First off, let's talk about talents. Now, even a measure of talent, a talent of gold, is the assumption. In fact, some modern translations may just simply say bags of gold. It's assumed that it's talking about a talent of gold. And a talent is a weight of something. It's a measurement in regards to a weight of something. You have a talent of silver. You could have a talent of gold. And the assumption is that it's the highest value. And so it's not even across the board unanimous on exactly the value of these talents. I've seen everywhere from just a few $1,000s to $2-point-something million in estimations of what this really represents. But the vast majority would agree that this represents a great sum of money, that it most likely would be around 20 years' wages for a common laborer at that time. And so I don't think we should get too wrapped around the axle on exactly how much monetary value this represents. I think we got to understand Jesus' main point. The main point is this is a treasure of great, great worth, and it doesn't belong to you. It's the master's to begin with, however great or small, but it is a great treasure, even if you only got the 1 talent. It's a large treasure of money, and it belongs to the master, and he has expectations. Well, let's talk about what these talents could potentially represent. There's various ideas out there, but we're gonna tackle kind of the main 3. Let's just look at it at face value for what it is. It's money. It's money that we've been given resources. And if we just think about this in the physical sense, it's a sermon all by itself. It's a powerful sermon all by itself. How many talents do we have as Christians living in a free country in the year 2022? How many luxuries are we afforded? How many of us own a home, even if it's tiny, even if it's rented, even if we feel like we don't have enough space, but we have a home in which we could be hospitable? How many of us have access because of communication to the world around us? Now, that we could talk to people, we could meet people, we could travel, we could have conversations with people all over the planet. We have the ability to do so much. We live in a free country which allows us to do what we're doing right here, right now, and even share our faith and see people leave their atheism or leave a false religion and follow Jesus without consequences from our government. It's amazing resources that we have. We're all blessed with the resource of time. It looks different for everyone. And these talents in regards to the physical resources and gifts we've been given, it looks different for everybody. We've been entrusted, all of us have been entrusted with something. Now let's take it to a much more spiritual place and think about this in regards to more the way we think of the word talents, which is we don't think of it as money, we think of it as gifts, abilities. And if we apply that to more of the spiritual blessings, that we know that Christ, through the Holy Spirit, has gifted each of us with spiritual gifts. And there's an expectation that we use those to serve. We use those to bless others. It's not just for us to enjoy for ourselves and be glad that I'm a good singer or I'm a good teacher or I know a whole lot. The idea is that they're meant to be used, they're meant to be multiplied. And I think with both of these gifts, there's an individual application for us, and I think there's also a collective application when we think about us collectively, the body of Christ and the church. And then finally, we have one that, and this is where a lot of the controversy comes in, is the idea of these talents being actually salvation. That if you think about it, the master has called his servants. He's given them a great treasure of great value that they didn't earn. He's given this to them with an expectation that they'll live out of this blessing that they've been given. That they won't just hide it away and forget all about it. And that there is an accounting to be had when the master returns at a time we don't know. I want to give you some context before we get too narrowed down on any one of these, because I believe that there's an application for all of it. And it's not just because my favorite answer in a multiple choice test is D, all of the above, if I don't know the answer. It is my favorite go-to when I'm having to guess, but I'm going to give us some context that I think will help bring this to light and where we'll see all these applications kind of apply. So Jesus is in Matthew 25. He's actually in the middle of two separate parables, but this is a continued conversation from Matthew chapter 24. And unfortunately for us as a reader, we have this mental thing where when we see a chapter number, we think there's some hard break there, and there's not. It's just a continuing, flowing conversation Jesus is having with the apostles. And in Matthew 24 at the beginning, he's explaining to them that the temple will be destroyed in the physical sense, and Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. In fact, it's a prophecy that is fulfilled just a few decades later. The Romans come and they annihilate Jerusalem, they destroy the temple, and the Jews are scattered. Jesus spends a lot of time discussing that and what signs to be on the watch for. But then he kind of seamlessly, kind of like Revelation does too, he kind of seamlessly goes right into also the return of Christ. The end, the day of the Lord, the judgment. When it comes, and the main point Jesus is making, he's giving us these signs, but the main point he's making is you got to be ready. Only the Father knows the time, and it's going to surprise all of you. So be ready. And he goes right from making this point right into 3 consecutive parables to follow that up. And so if we look at the beginning of Matthew chapter 25, in the very first verse, he says, the kingdom of heaven is like. The way he sets up many parables, because Jesus teaches so much on the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is like, and he goes into the parable of the 10 virgins. Make a long story short, it's basically there's 10 virgins, only 5 are ready. When the bridegroom returns at a time no one knew, no one could predict, they just had to be ready. 5 were ready, 5 were not. And the ones who were not allowed in, and they were told, I don't know you. Be prepared, be ready. That parable is followed up with this parable. So Jesus making the point, you got to be ready. Number 2 point, with this parable, you better do something in the meantime. There's an expectation the master has upon his return that's going to hit you when you don't expect it. And there's an accounting. There's an expectation that you've done something with what you've been given, that you've done something, you've been faithful, that you have honored the master in this time we have. And then the final parable is one you may know very well, and that's one we haven't got to yet, but we will get to towards the end of this series. The sheep and the goats. In this final judgment where Jesus is dividing the sheep and the goats, those who are in, those who are out. And it has so much to do with how you worshiped and how you served people. Did you take these gifts that you were given, that you were blessed with, and only indulge yourself and live for self? Or did you do the example that Jesus set before us and serve those in need? Did you care for those less fortunate? Did you do something to help people? And so it's all kind of sandwiched in this big teaching that Jesus is making. So I think what we have to keep in the context, we have to keep in the front of our mind is Jesus' teaching about the kingdom of heaven. And so therefore these talents that are represented in this parable have to do with all things related to the kingdom of heaven. How are you using your money? How are you using your time? How are you using the resources, the physical resources, the freedom you've been given, the education you've achieved? How are you using this for the kingdom, or is it only buried into this world? How are you using the spiritual gifts God has given you? Are you serving the body? Are you honoring God? Are you glorifying God, or only living for self? And finally, how about salvation? What are you doing with this gospel? Is it just my fire insurance? Is it just my get out of hell card? Is it just my blessed assurance I'm going to sit on? I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to wait. And I'm going to bury it. Eventually kind of forget about it. Kind of forget that my identity is in the kingdom of heaven now. It's not just something to wait for. I'll say it again. It's not just something to wait for. That is to be used now. That is a gift that's with the expectation of being multiplied, being shared. And that I think it's all encompassingly as people of the kingdom are fruitful and on mission and multiplying and glorifying God with what they've been given. It's His anyway. It's a master's gift. It's a master's treasure. These servants are simply servants, but they have been called, they have been entrusted, and there's an expectation. And sadly, so many people live this life assuming there's zero expectation. But we know better. Something that the master does, he gives these things according to their ability. He's made a prejudgment about these servants. He knows them, and they know him. However, one thing about the lazy servant is apparently he's got some pretty bad theology. He only knows the hard side of his master. So many people only know the wrathful side of God, and they don't understand that he is a benevolent, patient, loving, grace-giving Father who is good. So they operate out of this fear. But one thing that we fall so prey to is the struggle with our comparison issues. Right? Like me looking at the tall guys and being jealous. Right? Like we struggle with these comparisons. And we think, and it's really bad in church, y'all. It really is. We think, oh, well, if we just had a big building like that church down the road, boy, think of all the things we could do. If we just had a bigger budget, man, if we just had, if we had a big praise team with all the instruments, we'd have so many more people in there. Or if we could just do this, or if we could just do that. And I'll tell you one thing that's hurt us too is kind of the Christian celebrity kind of thing that we've got going on now. And because so much of what we think of as church is so formal, it's here, it's right now. I'm on the stage. There's only one person on the stage right now. That's it. And so if you think, man, God's really given me a gift for proclaiming the gospel, I feel like I've got a prophetic gift, but I'm not the preacher. Guess I can't use it. God's given me a gift of song, and I love to worship, but I can't sing like Jabari or Eddie, so, guess I'll just keep it to myself. We've got to get out of that box. There are so many more ways God is calling us to use our gifts that it isn't at 9:30 on a Sunday morning in a building. It's so much more. And we have to have a kingdom mentality to see this. To be a faithful servant, which is what the 5 talent, the 2 talent guys are called, good and faithful servant. To be a faithful servant, you've got to take some risk. You've got to take risk. Faithful servants of God take risks. They went at once and they did business with their master's money. But the question is, what are you motivated by? Are you motivated by fear? That's clearly what the unfaithful servant was motivated by. Motivated by fear, so he buries it, he hides it. Doesn't want to lose it. But here's the thing, we know a few things about inflation these days, don't we? He doesn't return to the master what the master gave him, he returns less than. Because if it was buried, it's not as worth as much as it used to be. Especially these days. I'll let you figure out what that means. But he's just buried it out of this fear, out of this unhealthy fear. But let me tell you, fear is a good motivator. It is. It's a good motivator, but it's not anywhere near as good of a motivator as love, honor, gratitude, trust. And that's what we see from these good, faithful servants. They know their master better, and they want to honor him. They know I've been entrusted. There's this expectation. I will honor him. You hear it in their attitude. You see it in their immediate action, their faithfulness. I think it's interesting. He says to the one who has very little, even what he has will be taken away. And for the one who has a lot, even he'll be given even more. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. Preachers, you got to be careful when you give a poker example in a sermon. I'm going there. I don't care. If you've ever played poker, don't act like you haven't. If you've ever played poker, it's probably on your phone right next to your Bible app. Don't lie. You know that if you have a ton of chips, if you're the person with the most chips at the table, man, you can kind of bully everybody else at the table. You can make that work for you. You can use that. If you're down to the last few chips, if you are the person with the least amount of chips at the table, it's not going to be good. And so there's this tendency to, I got to protect. I got to be on the defense. I got to be really, really careful, really, really safe so I don't lose it all. But guess what? If you play that way, you're going to lose it all. If you fold every single time, you're eventually going to lose what you've got because of the blinds. That's how that works. But you'll eventually lose what you got if you just keep folding, folding, folding. The only way in poker to get back in the game, the only way to have a chance at winning, you got to go all in. You got to go all in. You got to risk it. It's all or nothing. I'm either going out or I'm going to get back in this game. And when I hear what Jesus describes as disciples who follow him, when I hear words about loving the Lord with all your heart and not loving the world, and if you're going to follow me, you got to pick up your cross and deny yourself, I hear you got to go all in. There is risk involved, but it is so worth it. And I know I said that there's some church examples, and I haven't made that many just yet, but I've, from this stage many times, talked about kind of my journey out of very, very legalistic churches and legalistic mentalities. And I remember early on, probably 20 years ago, this was a parable that was very, very convicting to me. Because I started to think of the churches that I was accustomed to being a part of as being so much like this fearful servant who was burying the talent. Because they had this unhealthy fear of God. We started making rules where there weren't rules, and we started to basically make every decision as a church about, okay, what's the safest thing we can possibly do? Not what's the most glorifying to God, what's the most fruitful. I mean, to me, it's stuff that's just crazy. Crazy. Because we don't see an express written consent in the scriptures about how exactly to fund missions or how to exactly to take care of orphans. Let's just be careful and not do it. Or not do it in this way in case God gets mad that we funded the wrong type of organization. Churches split over that kind of stuff. Like, what are you doing? Like, how fearful is that? Now, I want to take a second and think about this. This is one of those points I knew I wanted to make early on when I signed up for this sermon. The laziness of this servant actually looks on the outside like really hard work. Think about it. The master didn't hand these guys a debit card. He didn't hand them really light, little crisp $100 bills. He handed them a talent of gold. I don't know. I'll have to check my bank account. I don't think I have a talent of gold in there that I could get out in gold. But I'm betting that's a large, physically represented on this stage. It would probably be a large amount. It would probably be very, very heavy. Now, using the modern tools that they had 2,000 years ago, a shovel 2,000 years ago, and think about digging a hole big enough to bury all that gold, covering it back up, hiding all your tracks, hiding any trace that might tip somebody off that, hey, I bet there's treasure buried there. And then you got to have a backup plan, because what if I die before the master gets back? I got to have like somebody I trust who knows, hey, this is where it's hidden, and know that it's going to be safe. And then guess what? The master comes back. Got to drop what I'm doing and go dig it all back up again. So I'm betting when he came back, he was pretty proud of himself. Master, look at that. I didn't lose a penny. You see these calluses? You know how many shovels I broke? I got to go to the chiropractor every week. Like, I have put in the work. Aren't you proud? Not hardly. And I think, I've got one example really quick that came to mind. It might be dumb, but when I was in college, I had a 3rd-story apartment here in Denton. And it was my turn to go get groceries. I had 3 roommates. And I get back to the apartment, and I've got all these groceries. 3 flights of stairs. I got this. I can do this. So I know y'all have all done it before, even if you don't live in a third. You got 20 bags of groceries in your hand somehow. Right? Every little finger's going, you got it all. And I get up to the top of the stairs, and I'm out of breath, and my fingers are purple, and I'm knocking on the door like this. And I remember my roommate opens the door and just stands there and stares at me. And he starts cracking up laughing. It's like, isn't that just glorified laziness, Brandon? Pretty much. I just didn't want to go up the flight of stairs more than I had to. And I think we can be doing a whole lot of glorified laziness. We can be so busy with the comfortable to avoid the faithful. We can get so busy with just doing church things instead of spiritual warfare and real kingdom business. One more thing. I've kind of said it already, I suppose, but just to reiterate, he buries it into the ground. He buries it into the earth, as you would see in a lot of translations. And the earth is often symbolic for the world, as in the broken, fallen world, as in the reign of the enemy, as in something that we're opposed to in the kingdom. And you think about how easy it is to just bury all the good things of God and invest just in this life, in this short life. It's a waste. One of my favorite movies, great quote from a great movie, A Bronx Tale. It's the only mafia movie I could recommend dads watch with their sons. It's a great movie. A Bronx Tale, the father, Robert De Niro, is playing, tells his son, remember, the saddest thing in life is wasted talent. You could have all the talent in the world, but if you don't do the right thing, then nothing happens. It is sad. Wasted talent, wasted opportunity, wasted gifts. Something we definitely regret. We've got to live a life with purpose. And I can tell you what, I can't think of another time in human history where there are more opportunities, more distractions, the more ways that you can absolutely waste every second of your life. And it's socially acceptable. Everybody talks about binge watching, right? I mean, we can pour. I love those videos like Superhuman. What is it called? Humans Are Awesome. You ever seen that YouTube loop? Humans Are Awesome. It's these crazy people that are like riding a unicycle and jumping upstairs on a unicycle while juggling parakeets. I mean, it's just the most odd, bizarre thing. You're like, how? What? Like, but all I can see is like, that's impressive. I'm entertained in this moment, but how many hours? What have you not done so that you could do that? Is the question that always comes to my mind. But that I got to ask myself the same question. There's so many distractions. And that's for all of us. And even more so, I suffer from ADD, you know? It stands for attention deficit. Dang, my wife looks pretty this morning. Hi. What was I talking about? You don't have to have ADD, Bo. All of us, every opportunity in the world to completely live distracted and waste our time, to waste our energy, to waste our gifts, to waste our passions. But here's the flip side of that. It's also never been as easy to share your faith. It's so easy now. We've got the Bible on our phones in a gajillion languages and translations. We've got ways to communicate with people on the other side of the planet. The nations are coming to us. Life is so much more simple, even though for some reason it's so much more hectic and fast-paced, it seems. But it is more simple as far as just hunting and gathering and getting food and getting your basic needs met. It's so much more simple that we have the abilities, we have the time to invest in kingdom business. There's so many opportunities, but we make the choice every day. Am I going to just bury it and bury myself in self and in this life, or am I going to be about my Father's kingdom business? I want to give you just a few, like a scripture medley, and then we'll land this plane. Ephesians 4:1. As a prisoner of the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. Colossians 1:9-12. Luke 17:10, just to keep us very humble, to keep the 5-talent guy very, very humble, so you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, we are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty. In Ephesians 5:15-16, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Making the most of every opportunity. We've all been given resources, physical blessings. We've all been given time, and it's a different amount for everybody. I have a friend from our previous church who was diagnosed with cancer a month ago. Yesterday we attended his funeral. 10 or 11 years older than me. Life's short. We don't know the day or the hour when we'll meet the Lord or when he'll come to us. Time, resources look different for all of us. But the gospel, salvation, the kingdom, it's given to us with abundance. It's given to us with expectation. I told you I knew where I wanted to land this sermon the moment I signed up for it. And where I want to land is heavy. I'm just giving you a warning. There's a scene from a movie that it's one of the heaviest scenes I can think of. It's at the end of Schindler's List. If you haven't seen the movie, it's about a German, he was a Nazi, wealthy businessman, very shrewd businessman, owned a giant factory. And what he realized was these Jews that were being taken prisoner, these Jews that were going to concentration camps, well, man, that's wasted workforce. That's wasted talent for my factory. Let me get some of these people and put them to work in my factory. It'd be like free labor. This is great. It's a win-win. And so he proposes this idea, and he actually has to pay for these people. And that's why the movie is called Schindler's List. It's this list of people. It's a list of life that he's paying to have these people come work for him. And at first, it's all about him and his business and his money. But it becomes so much more than that when he realizes the weight of what he has done. So at the end of the movie, it should be a time of rejoicing. It should be a time of just gladness and thanksgiving, because the war is over. The Jews are free now. And so these workers can leave and they can go back and try to find family and try to reestablish themselves and try to find a new life again. And they have Oskar Schindler to thank for their very lives. And so in this final scene, I think we have an image of it. In this final scene, he's met with these over 1,000 people that he has saved their lives. And they are trying to give him a gift. They're trying to give him the words that they've put down. They've given him a ring as a gift of memory, showing their gratitude, showing their thankfulness that he has saved their lives. And in this moment, it's when it gets real. It gets really real. And he recognizes the weight of what he did and what he had. And he starts begging for their forgiveness, begging that he didn't do more. I could have saved more. He takes off the ring off his finger. He's like, this was a person. He takes off a stupid gold pin on his suit. He's like, this is nothing. This could have been a person. This car, that was 2 families. He starts begging for their forgiveness for not doing more. They're trying to assure him that he did enough, but he's not convinced. He knows. He says, I've wasted so much. I've wasted so much in my life. It sits so heavy with me. Now, I saw that when I was probably in junior high. And I remember how heavy that scene sat. I didn't know I was going to be preaching one day, but I knew that was a great sermon illustration at that young age. It's heavy. Because this is what I'm convinced of. I'm convinced there are no tears in heaven, and we're done with regrets, and there is